right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of D&D 5e to make sure that you can get the most out of your choices. So, today, we are continuing in my series about heroes and the villains of the Theros. The new supplement to the Theros campaign setting that Dael Kingsmill and Jeremy M. I'm going to learn your name, Jeremy. I promise. But my brain doesn't work, and I haven't slept in like a day. So, yay! Anyway, just as a quick reminder, we've already done 6 of the 12 subclasses that are part of this new supplement. In addition to the subclasses, there are a bunch of NPC stat blocks. There's some new magic items, and there's 2 new backgrounds in this whole supplement. The whole thing is like $8. It's a fantastic deal. There is a link in the description below to pick it up. I highly recommend you do. Despite the fact that I've had some criticism of a few of these subclasses, the overall package I think is phenomenal. And even the subclasses that I do think need some working are still really interesting ideas. And some of them only have like maybe 1 or 2 little flaws that need to be ironed out. So please check it out. Because I am doing this review less than, or not review, deep dive, less than a week after it comes out. I will be leaving out certain parts of the features simply so that people can't use this video to avoid having to purchase the guide itself. So again, I highly recommend you pick it up. Last time I checked, it was an Electrum bestseller on the DMs Guild, so super cool. With all that being said, let's dive into the next 2 classes. First one, the Paladin Oath of Atonement. The idea behind the Atonement Paladin is kind of, if you're familiar with the story of Hercules, he was driven mad, ended up murdering and burning his family, because Greek myths and legends are always, really upbeat. And in order to atone for it, that's why he did his 12 labors. It's more complicated than that, but that's the really simple children's book version of it. So the idea of atonement is actually really common in mythology in general. Like, you see a lot of myths about somebody that had something go wrong, or they did something, or they didn't do something, and through their inaction, something bad happened, and they have this desire to atone for it. You actually see that a lot in a lot of religions as well, with Catholicism actually. One of their big tenets being about the idea that you have to confess your sins and then repent and atone for them, generally by reciting pre-written prayers and things like that. That's why at the end of confession, the priest will go, "Hey, do 10 Hail Marys and for our fathers." So the idea of atonement is something I'm very familiar with. And to be blunt, I really like this as a motivation for a paladin. You actually see this theme a lot in fiction in general, where something bad will happen, and someone will turn to religion in order to make up for whatever bad thing happened. And I think it creates a really interesting character to play, because as much as it sounds like a very simple idea, oh, I did something bad, therefore I have to do good things to make up for it. It can be significantly more complex, because it can be anything from what you feel that you did was bad might not be as bad. Like, you might be blaming for yourself for something that you had no control over. On the other side, you could have done something very bad, and your whole idea of atonement is simply a save face maneuver. And through going through the steps of atonement, you have to kind of come to terms with the real motivation for why you are atoning for things. So I think it creates a really, really awesome character dynamic and a really cool growth arc, because the nice thing about atonement is, theoretically, there's an end to it. Eventually you will pay for what you did. Or you might have decided there's no way for you to pay for what you did, and you have this permanent servitude that you eventually have to come to terms with, going, well, is what I did really impossible to atone for? Have I paid for it? And then, what happens after you've paid for it? Do you go to do something else? Do you continue atoning for something that's already been paid for? Like I said, there's so many cool character options for this. Paladins themselves are really interesting. Dael, in her video, describes the idea that in Greek myths, you don't really have paladins per se, which are effectively holy warriors, or warriors that dedicate themselves to a specific god. It's significantly more common in Greek myth to have demigods who, because they're related to a deity, they either fight for the deity or against them. But the gods in Greek myth are really weird, and it's relatively rare for them to just bestow any sort of power on mortals. They're much more at home, kind of using them as chess pieces and things like that. And rarely they will give a boon in the form of a magic item of some sort. But that's it. So she wanted to kind of go in a slightly different way than your traditional paladin, and I like it. So again, paladins will always have 3 tenets of their oath, which is their subclass. The tenets for this are balance the scales, repent wrongdoing, and forgive transgressions, which are all perfect for the idea of atonement. And I specifically enjoy the last one, for forgive transgressions, because the entire idea of atonement is they have to pay for the bad things that they did, but part of their tenets are to forgive other people for the bad things that they do, effectively not forcing them to pay for what they did. In a sense, it doesn't mean crime goes. Forgiveness is not about crime going unpunished. Forgiveness is literally giving up your kind of rights to be upset and extract some sort of vengeance on the other person for what they did to you. So I like that dichotomy. Now, I haven't gone into a lot of the kind of role-playing aspects of most of the other classes. And the reason I put such a big emphasis on role-playing with Paladins is they are a role-playing class. More than anything else, the idea of a Paladin, going even all the way back to second edition, I believe, is where they first popped up. It might have been first edition of Advanced D&D. They were limited to lawful good alignments for quite a few editions. I think all the way up till I think the fourth edition is when they got off of that. Their whole class is built around role playing, and even the abilities we're going to go through here really heavily rely on the role playing aspect of paladins. So if you really do want to kind of sink your teeth into a really heavy duty role playing kind of class, paladins can definitely give you that. So let's jump into the nitty gritty of it. So just to kind of remind you how 5th edition works, in 5th edition, every single class should play very differently from the other classes. That's 5e design philosophy. And the things that make a class unique should show up within the first or second level. So for Paladin, the things that make them unique is they are a hybrid magic fighter, but they are a divine magic fighter. So they get things like fighting style at the second level and stuff to make them better fighters. But the things that are uniquely Paladin are lay on hands is a defining paladin feature, which is basically they have a pool of hit points that they can transfer to anyone else or can use to heal themselves, making them kind of an off healer. They get 5 hit points per level of paladin that they have, and it's incredibly useful when playing. It requires your action to do it, so it does give you a choice of, do I want to attack or do I want to help out? But I cannot tell you how many clutch situations can be saved by a paladin knowing when to use their lay on hands. The other thing that defines a paladin is the divine smite. Like I said, paladins are casters. They're what are called half casters. So they don't get as many spell slots as full casters, and they don't get as high level spells. They only go up to level 5. Paladins have a unique way to use their spells, which is through divine smite. When they hit something, they can burn a spell slot and do extra damage to their target, depending on the level of spell slot. And this is one of the most advantageous the things a paladin can do in combat. Mostly because you don't have to decide to smite until after you hit with the attack. So a very, very common tactic for most paladins is they will hit a target, see that it's a crit, and then throw on a divine smite, because you add extra dice to your damage roll, and anytime you crit in 5th edition, you roll double the number of dice you normally would. So paladins can do incredible burst damage. So that's really what the paladin is built on. They're a holy fighter. They have the ability to both heal and kind of protect others, as well as go on the offensive. And any of the oaths generally tends to pick one or the other to really emphasize, and may give you kind of passive effects to help the other one. So let's jump right into it. Right at the third level, you get your channel divinity options. We've talked about channel divinity with clerics. Mentioned that both clerics and paladins get channel divinity, but clerics get to use it more, and they get it earlier. Thank you, Vivone. But paladins get it as part of their subclass, their oath, and so that means every oath has 2 separate channel divinities, compared to clerics, who all have turn undead and then one more from their divine domain. So the channel divinity for the oath of Atonement is, as a bonus action, you can use your channel divinity to choose a creature within the 30 feet of you, and then for a minute, whenever you take the damage, that creature restores some hit points. If you'd like to know the exact calculation for how many hit points they get, go ahead and pick up the class. The link is below, and it's definitely worth it. And a creature can't exceed their hit point maximum by getting healed with this, and the effect ends if the creature is healed to their hit point maximum. This is really cool. Going back to the role-playing idea of atoning for their crimes, this really fits into the idea of suffering to kind of pay for whatever crime you have performed. You know, this actually gives them an incentive to run into enemies and take as many hits as they can, because as they hurt themselves, they help someone else. I think it's really interesting. Again, any good character option in 5th edition should give you a choice. It shouldn't give you this is always the right thing to do. And I think that's what this does perfectly. Not only because you have to worry about how much damage you're taking, you also have to consider how much healing can this person take, because it either lasts for a minute or until they hit their hit point maximum. So if you do it and they hit their hit point maximum in one turn, you've burned your channel divinity really fast. This probably the most useful way to use this would kind of be like pairing up with a hoplite, where you're both going forward, and as you take the damage, the hoplite gets healed, and as he takes damage, he lowers his current hit points so he can keep receiving healing. And then you kind of have this symbiotic relationship, because the hoplite can actually heal other people. Like, this combined with a hoplite in a party would be super useful. Now, the other thing, channel divinity for a paladin is a one and done thing. You have to take a shorter long rest to get your channel divinity back. So that's another thing that's going to, okay, when is this going to have the biggest impact? The other channel divinity option the Atonement Paladin gets is called Protective Charge. As a reaction, when an ally is hit by an attack from an attacker you can see within 15 feet, you can spend your channel divinity to immediately move right next to them and then make a single melee attack against them. This is another thing that's really interesting. First, we've talked about this many times. Action economy is really important in 5th edition. The side that has more actions always has the advantage, and this even goes as far as things like boss quote unquote monsters, things like dragons or vampires that have legendary actions. They have those legendary actions because they're designed to be fought by a single monster fought by a small party, and if the party has more actions than they do, they're always going to lose. Like, it's a massive deal. So by turning your reaction into an attack, you are gaining actions for your party. And again, we've already talked about the two things paladins do. They can help kind of defend their friends using their healing word, and just because they get heavy armor and can use shields and that, they're hard to hit. And they have that burst damage. So this channel divinity does both of those. They have the first one that lets you kind of heal, and the second one where you can go make a melee attack and then smite on top of that, because anytime you make an attack and you hit, you can add a smite to it. So this really encapsulates the idea of Paladin of, are you going to go for the healing route, or are you going to go for the you're going to die route? So I like that. I think they're really well balanced. Nothing I would change. 7th level, you get Shield of Contrition. First of all, I love the word contrition because it's just not used often enough outside of a church. That being said, let's actually to talk about this thing. Basically, when an ally is within 10 feet of you and is targeted by an attack, you can use your reaction. Again, nice action economy stuff there. You always want uses for your bonus action and reaction. To reduce your armor class by an amount that, if you want to know the exact equation to figure that out, pick up this supplement. Got a link for it in the description down below, and it's definitely worth it. However much your armor class is reduced, you increase your ally's armor class by that much. And you can do this after the attack has been rolled, but must declare your intent before to do so before success or failure is announced, which is really a common wording. And it lasts until the end of your next turn. At 18th level, you just expand the range that you can do it up to 30 feet. There's a lot of things I like about this. First of all, there's not a limit to this. It's not you can do this is so many times between short rests, or so many times based on your wisdom or charisma modifier, whatever. This is when it needs to happen, it can happen. It reduces your armor class, so depending on where you are in an initiative, this can be a very low risk maneuver, or it can be an extremely high risk maneuver. And you can actually combine this with that channel divinity to make you easier to hit, so your ally can get more hit points. So yeah, I again, the idea of atonement, and I have to pay for what I did, and giving of yourself to protect someone else. It just feeds into the idea of the class over and over again, and I just love it. This is such a role-playing heavy class in general, and all the stuff so far mechanically have a lot of uses. None of them feel incredibly overpowered, though I have to say, without going into specifics, I think this one might I would want to see it played for a couple months to be able to decide if it needs any sort of modification, because the amount you theoretically might be able to change armor classes is pretty big, and could create issues at like the mid-range levels, like tier 2 and the first part of tier 3. After that, it's just a really good ability. So yeah, overall really cool ability, lots of use, maybe a tiny bit OP, but it would be something I would have to test for months of sessions to be able to really say if it's something that would cause issues or not, and would need to be modified. For the 15th level, you get Hold Back the Tide. And again, this class really, or this is a subclass, really bridges the two kind of aspects of Paladin of I do lots of damage, I heal my party and help my party. Hold Back the Tide, basically, you get a +1 to your attack roll for every creature over 1 that are around you when you make your attack. For every hostile creature, I should say. So this increasingly incentivizes the idea of this paladin jumping into the fray, getting as many people as possible to fight this paladin, as opposed to its allies, and again can feed into that inspiring sacrifice channel divinity. Like I said, the whole thing is really interesting, and it's a really simple thing. And that's another thing that you'll sometimes see, and we've talked about it in a couple of the other classes, where they'll try to do something that just becomes really complicated really quick. And 5th edition is about simplicity. And this is an extremely simple but effective way to change and incentivize a style of play. You just when you're making your attack roll, you just go, okay, 1, 2, 3, subtract 1. Okay, plus 2 to my attack roll. And then you can smite with it and all that. Yeah, it's cool. Like I said, I'm kind of fangirling over this class because I really like it. It has not replaced my favorite yet because I still can't get over Mosesing the Red Sea for the travel cleric because it's just cool. This is a close second. The 20th level ability. For paladins, their 20th level of ability is based on their oath, and it's always some sort of transformation of ability. It'll generally last a minute, and it will give them specific powers or something that just makes them massively badass for a minute, and can definitely be tied to turning in combat, just because of how much it changes how they will work. This one, and I have to do this, is called Larger Than Life. Boom, and Dael, if you weren't singing Larger Than Life when you were writing this, you did it wrong. And if at your table, you don't make them break out into can't you see, you know, I mean, that's just you have to. I realize the Backstreet Boys are not Greek myths, but it's larger than life. You have to. Okay, so now that I've gotten to sing Larger Than Life very poorly, this is what it is. Using your action, which is how they all work, for a minute, you get the following benefits. You grow to large size. Your walking speed increases by 10 feet. Your strength mod is doubled on melee weapon attacks you make. And their reach is extended by 5 feet. You have advantage on strength checks and saving throws, and you gain temporary hit points. And if you want to know the exact number of temporary hit points, pick up the class, link in the description down below. You turn into a giant. That's effectively what this is, and everything about this fits. You get higher walk speed because your legs are longer. Your reach increases because everything grows. You have extra strength because you're extra big. It actually shares a fair amount with the enlarge spell, but kind of dialed up to 11. And I really like the idea of the Atonement Paladin, you know, just going pure Ultraman and going, and then being again able to attack or defend a lot better. A lot of people will see this as a purely attack-oriented ability, which, to be blunt, it has mostly offensive abilities. But the fact that you're 10 feet by 10 feet, which is a large creature, means you can block people more effectively. You can actually, in a situation where you're in a hallway or something like that, or there's some sort of bottleneck, you can fill a bottleneck yourself. Like, there's a lot of defensive aspects to being very, very large. Yeah. Overall, the Atonement Paladin, I think, is really, really cool. Like I said, I'm actually more excited about the role-playing opportunities than I am about the mechanics. But the mechanics are really, really well done. This is something I did definitely allow in at my table. I should probably also mention all oaths get a bunch of spells. This oath gets a bunch of spells. Most of them make sense. Things like compel duel kind of makes sense with the idea that they can force someone to attack only them, thus protecting their allies. And again, paying the price of their sin through their own blood. Things like counter spell, anti-life shield. But then there's some other ones that I'm like, I'm not quite as sold on. Things like Crusader's Mantle, I tend to think as a much more aggressive thing. Like I use it on my Vengeance Paladin all the time. So yeah, overall, I like the oaths spells. I'm not sure of the inspiration behind a couple of them, but for the most part, like it fits. So let's jump down to the Ranger Sacred Keeper. Let's start off by talking about the PHB Ranger. In my PHB Ranger video, I talked about how the Ranger itself is a slightly broken class in the PHB. The features fight against each other, and the class itself really doesn't do what it wants to do. Literally, anything a PHB Ranger can do, another class can do better. And it makes most people that play the PHB Rangers feel very underpowered. It's one of the least used classes until they released as a Xanathar's Guide. The Sword Coast Adventures Guide didn't even have additional options for the Ranger because they were working on how to improve it. So that being said, the Xanathar's Guide Rangers are better than the PHB Rangers. Like if you're playing one of the PHB subclasses of Rangers, and you have a Xanathar Ranger with you, you are going to feel underpowered because again, the class wasn't designed really well, and Xanathar's Guide took some really big steps to fix a lot of the issues. So normally when I talk about these and I talk about whether or not they're balanced, I'm comparing them to the PHB because no one should really feel underpowered when you introduce a new subclass. It's just not good design to have a subclass that's significantly better. And again, I've mentioned before, the idea of providing new options for characters in an RPG is they should give you a choice. You shouldn't have a clearly better choice that you always have to make, or you are somehow handicapping yourself. So that being said, this class is better than, or this subclass is better than the PHB ones, and it's more powerful than the PHB ones. So I'm not going to be comparing it to those. I'm going to be comparing it to the Xanathar's Guide ones, but because for balancing wise, because the Xanathar's Guide ones are just significantly better, but balanced against the rest of the classes and subclasses. So, that being said, what is the Sacred Keeper? They do kind of fit into to the idea of Rangers, which when we talk about kind of the defining features of Rangers, we have their what's it called? Chosen enemy, favorite enemy. There we go. They have their favorite enemy. Rangers are built around the idea that they are natural, as in nature style hunters. So they have a specific group of enemies that they are supremely knowledgeable about and can hunt better than anyone else. They should be a combination of a little bit of magic. They're half casters, but that magic should help them to be super hunters. they have abilities that allow them to move through the wilderness much better than other classes, because they're supposed to be more at home in the wilderness than they are in civilization. Think of Strider or Aragorn from Lord of the Rings. When he's out in the wilderness with the hobbits, he's able to lead them faster and more directly than they were themselves, despite the hobbits being very good in the wilderness. So that kind of idea of, the ranger is this natural hunter that's very at home in the wilderness with a little bit of nature magic to make him that much more powerful. The other defining feature of the hunter is Hunter's Mark. Which I've talked about before. I'm not a fan of Hunter's Mark being a spell instead of a feature built into the class, because even the designers have said, well, they wanted Hunter's Mark to be an exclusively hunter thing. It's what makes hunters so special, and it's not entirely. Vengeance Paladins get Hunter's Mark as part of their oaths spells. And warlocks and anyone that takes the magic and an initiate feat gets Hex, which works remarkably similar to it. So that being said, let's actually dive into the class itself. The first thing that they get is additional spells. This is something that's started with the Xanathar's Guide Rangers, and it's a better way to run Rangers than the PHP class. The thing that I find interesting is generally the additional spells are stuff that aren't found on the Rangers spell list, and this actually gives you two that are a part of the Rangers spell list, which are Hunter's Mark, which we'll talk about in a second, and Conjure Animals. These additional spells are ones that you always have prepared, and they don't count against the spells you can prepare daily as a ranger. So every other ranger, again, one of the defining features of a ranger is their Hunter's Mark. So every other ranger, to have a defining feature of their class, has to waste one of their slots for Hunter's Mark. This one doesn't. And it kind of takes Hunter's Mark away from being a spell and moves it a little bit more towards the idea of being a feature of the class, which for the most part I like. Again, I think it should have been baked into the class itself. And I don't think other classes should have access to it without multi-classing into Ranger. So I kind of like this as kind of a halfway point, where now it's more intrinsic to the class itself, and you don't have to waste resources in order just to have it prepared. You still need to use a spell slot to cast it, which I'm fine with, because lots of classes have alternate ways to use their spell slots. But so yeah, I like that. It's interesting. As we go along, more things happen that make me a little more unsteady about it. So you also get what's called the Divine Mark at the third level, which modifies Hunter's Mark. Again, this is a really weird thing for any other class, because you generally don't modify spells unless you're a Warlock. That's a defining feature of the Warlock, is they modify spells with their... they permanently modify spells with their Eldritch vocations. So this is going to actually modify Hunter's Mark, which basically, when you roll initiative, you can immediately cast Hunter's Mark without using a bonus action. Normally, for a hunter, the first round of combat, you have to cast Hunter's Mark as your bonus action, and then anytime a creature you're hunting dies, use your bonus action to switch it for as long as the spell continues. So this lets you start off combat with your kind of defining ability, that a Hunter's Mark, automatically on one of the targets, which, again, I think that's how it should have been made, but because it wasn't, this starts to kind of balance it to the idea, well, before it was underpowered, and now you're kind of modifying Hunter's Mark so much that now it's becoming a little bit more powerful. There aren't any other classes that get an automatic ability whenever they roll initiative. The best most other classes get is they will regain like key points or maneuver dice or the things like that if they're out. So I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just saying that this is flirting with the idea of over balancing. There's two other aspects to it. If you roll a 1 on your damage die for Hunter's Mark damage, you can re-roll it. And any damage dealt by your Hunter's Mark is radiant, which will come into play later. This is a lot for the third level, but the main focus of it is the idea that Hunter's Mark is an intrinsic part of the Ranger, which I've said before, and that was the design before. This is just kind of taking that idea and put it into practice. So, yeah, third level is a Hunter's Mark level, basically. Additionally, at the third level, you get what's called Blessed Armaments, which is explained, and there's a lot of rules as to how it works or anything, but effectively it allows you to magically create ammo for your weapon, or to create a non-magical simple weapon. Just by touching something like a log or a tree or something like that. You can use this ability a specific number of times to find out the actual equation for that. Go ahead and pick up the class. There's a link in the description down below, and it's definitely worth it. Yeah, so if you're walking around and for whatever reason you don't have a weapon, you can, touch a log and make a dagger, or to touch a log and make an arrow. So you're never really out of ammo as a ranger. The only issue I have with this is almost every single game I've run since D&D 5e was D&D Next, we don't really keep track of ammo, and ammo is remarkably easy to get. Like it's relatively cheap. You can buy it in bulk. So yeah. Now there's an alternate use of this where you burn all of your uses at once, and you can actually duplicate a magical piece of ammo, which is a big deal. Something like a lightning arrow or something like that. Being able to turn that from 1 to 2 is a big deal. And if you don't use that particular piece of ammo for a few days or a few weeks even, you can create a lot of this ammo. And it effectively means you are never... Once you get a magical piece of ammo, you will never run out of that ammo as long as you use this conservatively. And that I do think is really interesting. With the fact that they get 3 things right at the third level when they get this, one of which is changing how a major spell works and is used in the game. I'm kind of fine with the first half of it not being super useful except for certain situations. The second half, again, it would be something that I would want to see played over a few months of sessions to see if it is something that's easily exploitable. Because one of the limiting factors of most magic ammunition is the fact that it's limited, and this effectively could make it unlimited. So that's my only, I guess, issue. It's not really an issue, more of an observation of it. It has the possibility of being abused, but maybe not. So we'll see. So the 7th level, you get what's called Devoted Mind, which gives you advantage on con saves to maintain your concentration. I mentioned this before. Concentration is the major limiting factor of D&D 5th edition. It prevents you from overlapping spells that are just too powerful together. It limits the power of a lot of the most powerful spells, so having advantage on concentration checks is a big deal. The other half of this is when you cast a Hunter's Mark, it doesn't require concentration. This is where I think the scales kind of tip and make this particular version of the hunter, or I mean of the ranger, significantly more powerful than any other Xanathar subclass, and obviously more powerful than the PHB ones. Not having to concentrate on Hunter's Mark is a really big deal, because you can now combine Hunter's Mark with other concentration spells that can make you significantly more powerful. Things like I think it's called the Flaming Quiver, which basically adds fire damage to every attack. Any other hunter has to choose between Hunter's Mark and Flaming Quiver. The Sacred Keeper Ranger doesn't. Swift Quiver is another one that just gives you extra attacks, and Hunter's Mark procs every time you hit with a weapon attack. So both of those, with them both being relatively high levels, I think Swift Quiver is, I think, 5th level, and Flaming Quiver for Flaming Arrows, whatever it's called, I believe it's the 3rd level. It means that low-level characters aren't going to be able to do that, but before level 7, it's still concentration anyway. So this is where it starts getting a little bit, okay, now you're making the other Xanathar classes be not as powerful as this one. You're starting to outclass them, because all ranger subclasses, the Hunter's Mark is a defining part of the class, and by modifying it this heavily, you're putting the other ranger subclasses at a distinct disadvantage, and it gets better. So let's go to 11th level, which is Nature's Mantle. On its own, I think this is probably one of the coolest abilities that the Sacred Keeper has. Because, again, it gives you choices. The basics of it are you have 4 different seasons, and every time you take a long rest, you can choose a season's mantle that will affect you until you take your next long rest. Each one does something a little different. Spring is called Endless Cycle, and it's basically whenever you reduce a creature to 0 hit points with a weapon attack, you regain hit points. If you want to know the specific number of hit points you gain, you'll have to check out the class itself by purchasing it by using the link in the description down below. Always good to be able to heal yourself. I really like the idea. Again, when you think about the ranger, they're built on the idea that they're particularly good at hunting a specific subset of creatures. They are super hunters, and they're really good in the wilderness. This kind of fuels the idea that they're very self-sufficient. That's how they can be so good in the wilderness on their own. They can actually heal themselves by hunting. That's what the rangers do. So I think it's really cool. Summer is called the light of the sun. And basically, whenever you do radiant damage, you can add your wisdom bonus to your damage. Now remember we mentioned before at 3rd level your Hunter's Mark damage now does radiant damage. So now every time you proc your Hunter's Mark, not only are you doing the damage from, in general, let's say you're using a bow, because this class is really built around bow rangers. It's not quite built for 2-weapon rangers, though almost everything here will work with 2-weapon fighting. But let's say, you've got your longbow, you shoot, you're going to do, I believe it's a D8 of damage with a longbow. You're going to do a D8 of damage with the longbow. You're going to add your dexterity modifier because it's a bow. You're going to add a D6 of radiant damage because of your Hunter's Mark, and then you're going to add your wisdom modifier, which wisdom is the spell casting ability for rangers. So you're probably at least going to have a 3, maybe even a 5 there if you're really high level, which by 11th level you might have 20 in both stats. So your Hunter's Mark is becoming significantly more powerful every single time a new ability is revealed. And with this ability right here, this is Summer's Mantle, you're going to be able to start outclassing fighters and paladins in damage output because you're just letting loose to tons of damage. You're getting 2 attacks per round minimum. If you combine those to 2-weapon fighting, you now have 3 attacks per round. So every round, if you hit with all your attacks, you're adding your dex bonus 3 times and your wisdom bonus the 3 times, in addition to the 3 damage dice for your weapon and the 3 damage dice for your Hunter's Mark. So this turns the ranger into a really effective killing machine. Like I said, my only issue with this is the fact that all other ranger subclasses are going to be significantly lower damage dealers and will have less things they can do because they have to keep up their Hunter's Mark using their concentration. So fall. It's called the Darkening Days, and this is another one I think is really interesting. When an ally makes an attack targeting a creature marked with your Hunter's Mark, you can use your reaction to give them the benefits of the Hunter's Mark as if they had cast the spell. So this is really cool. It gives another player that additional damage. It does say when an ally makes an attack, not hits. So you have to choose this before they actually make the attack roll. But again, if you're dealing with a paladin who again do big burst damage, if they're going in and they're going to be attacking the big bad guy, burning your reaction that turn to give them Hunter's Mark for a single attack is a big deal. It's going to add the dice if they crit. That's even more dice. It's really, really useful. And again, it kind of fits with the whole theme of this class we're seeing, where it's very Hunter's Mark focused. So that I like. And because it uses your reaction, it does limit it enough that this isn't something that's going to be abused and just everyone's going to get Hunter's Mark damage. So overall, I just think it's a good, unique ability. Winter is the only one that actually won't do anything for a 2-weapon fighter ranger. But it's basically the first time each turn you hit a creature with a ranged weapon attack, you can force them to make a con save, and if they fail it, you reduce their speed by 10 for the next minute, and if you can reduce their speed to 0 using that feature, they become restrained. If they make any of this, if they make this as a save, the speed's not reduced, and they become immune to it for the next 24 hours. So this is by far the most limited aspect. It has to be a ranged attack. They have to fail their save, and if they ever make their save, they're immune, and you can't use it anymore. And they can try to break free of it by taking an action on their turn and making a strength check against your spell save DC. And if the creature's speed is already 0, they have disadvantage. So I like the idea of this. It is extremely limiting, though, that they can basically be immune to the ability after just one saving throw, whereas every thing else will last you the entire combat and multiple combats. So that's the one thing I'm not really happy about with it. However, I can't think of a way to change it without it becoming really limiting. So with how useful everything else is, I'm actually fine with that being a little bit less useful, and I would just assume that particular mantle just won't be used almost ever. Which again isn't perfect design, but I would have to spend a lot more time with that to find a happy medium than a video like this allows. And the whole point of this video is not really to correct it. It's more to show you guys the different choices you have if you choose this, while adding my own recommendations in there when I can. So that's Nature's Mantle. Like I said, I really like the idea behind it, and other than Winter's Mantle, I think all of them have really good choice opportunity where they give you a valid choice you want to make. Do you want to be a little bit hardier? Go with Spring. Do you want to just become super damage dealing? Go Summer. Do you want to be a lot more kind of party focused? Do you have a really good damage dealer in the party you want to help? Go Fall. Do you want to be a little more control oriented? Go Winter. Just make sure your wisdom scores pretty high. Last but not least, I know this is getting a little long, but we've done 2 for every video, and I'm not going to stop here. Is Avatar of the Hunt, which is another one I think is really interesting. And I actually find it kind of interesting that we just did the Paladin. I know the reason that Ranger comes after Paladin is alphabetical. But this is a transformation ability, very similar in theme to a Paladin's transformation they get at 20. However, with this being a 15th level ability, it's not quite as powerful as it should be. So the idea is trying to you use your action just like the Paladin version, and it lasts for a minute, again just like the Paladin version. And these are the things that it does. The bonus damage you deal with Divine Mark increases to 1d8, and this is a wording issue. It says the bonus damage you deal with Divine Mark increases to 1d8, but Divine Mark technically doesn't give you bonus damage. It modifies how your Hunter's Mark works. So I would almost want this to say, hey, the bonus damage you deal with Hunter's Mark increases to 1d8 radiant damage, just because it's a little bit confusing. But the idea is this is still there. You go from a d6 to a d8. Again, keeping with that theme of we're going to supercharge Hunter's Mark. You can use a bonus action to change the blessing you receive from Nature's Mantle, which is huge. It only lasts for a minute, but for that minute, on your turn, you can start with Summer and do the extra damage. Use your bonus action to switch to Fall, and then when someone else does the damage to that target, you give them the Hunter's Mark, and then when it gets back to your turn, you can switch back to Summer again and do your extra damage. This really incentivizes kind of flying through these mantles, and I think it makes them more interesting that way. Again, because this is a one and done kind of thing, I don't think it really makes it overpowered. But for that 1 minute, you are a massively badass ranger. The location and number of any creature types you have chosen as your favorite enemy within a certain radius. If you want to know the exact radius, go ahead and pick up the supplement. It's only $8. It's definitely worth it on the DM's Guild. This kind of feeds into the favorite enemy, which again in the PHP is treated really poorly. So this gives you a little bit more use for it. It's still kind of a boring feature even with this. However, the next thing actually makes it kind of cool. When you roll the damage for a critical hit scored against any of your favorite enemies, you can choose to deal all your damage as radiant damage. And you can, if you roll a 1 on any of those damage dice, you can re-roll it and use this as a second one. So this is a really aggressive, powerful thing. And on its own, I don't have any issues with it. I think it's thematic. I think it's really interesting. I think it's really cool. However, when you look into how much they have modified Hunter's Mark in this, and the fact that this makes Hunter's Mark even more powerful, this all feeds into this. For me, is an overpowered ranger class, and probably my biggest issue with it is the devoted mind aspect of it, and making Hunter's Mark not concentration. It opens up way too many combinations of spells and abilities that can cause issues, and it puts this particular ranger above other rangers subclasses. So that's my only big issue with it. Now again, Ranger is already a broken class, so I understand the idea, and I actually like the idea of shifting Hunter's Mark away from a spell and turning it more into a spell-like ability. And they do that really effectively here. I just, comparing it to the other classes, this is a clear, obvious choice of just being a better Ranger class. I don't think the disparity is massive, but I think it's enough that this would be something I personally would want to take back to the drawing board and just make some slight modifications so it doesn't feel as better than the other class. And it doesn't make, like, again, if you have a Gloomstalker and a Sacred Keeper in the same party, even though the Gloomstalker gets a lot of really cool abilities, it's always going to be doing lesser damage and have less things it can do in the party than this is a Sacred Keeper every single time. And that's one of the big issues with the base Ranger classes. Whenever they're in a party, they always feel like they're playing second fiddle to a number of other classes, because they can all do everything the Ranger can do, but better. And this kind of flips it on the other side. Well, now even the Ranger can do what the Ranger can do, but better. So yeah, I love the idea. I love most of the abilities. With how much they buff Hunter's Mark, this would not be a class I would a subclass I would allow at my table as written. It's just so powerful, which is cool because again the Ranger was super underpowered before. I just think this shifts it in the other direction. So, that's the next two things. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. It really does help. Also, if you enjoy videos like this, or you just really enjoy D&D and RPG themes in general, subscribe to the channel. The vast majority of this stuff I do on here is all D&D and RPG related, because people seem to like it, and I sure do. In the comments below, the Paladin is super cool, but I think the Ranger subclass provides a lot more content for the discussion. So in the comments down below, what do you guys think of this Ranger subclass? Does it make you excited to want to play this kind of Ranger? Do you think I'm kind of out of line here in saying that it's too good? And you think it's just fine? Do you not like it as well? What are your thoughts on the Ranger, the Sacred Keeper Rangers specifically? But because I like I said, I think it's a really interesting class, but I think there's so much to it that a lot of people can have a lot of discussions about it. So put that in the comments down below. All right. Otherwise, that's all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right. Bye-bye.